Would you like to go through an entire pack of 6x6 pattern paper without making a bunch of scraps? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have this pack of paper from Everett Road and Bow and Arrow, and it is a 6x6 pattern paper pack. It has 12 sheets of patterned paper. I'm going to use all 12 sheets of pattern paper today to make 24 cards with no pattern paper scraps. I also purchased the coordinating die cuts, and there are 24 of them, so I will use all 24 die cuts, one on each card, and use up these supplies completely in making those 24 cards. So to get started, not only do I have my die cuts and my patterned paper. To make this really easy, I have my paper busting templates. If you've watched my channel before, you're very familiar with these. I've gone back to my 6x6 paper busting templates. I have not shared a new 6x6 paper busting template in quite a long time. I've been sharing some other sizes. However, I do finally have new 6x6 paper busting templates. I have numbers 51 through 60. So I now have 60 ways you can cut 6x6 pattern paper and turn it into cards with no pattern paper scraps. So in each of these, you will see on the left a template that shows you how to cut the pattern paper. It is usually in 2 or more colors to show you what paper you need for a particular card. So for instance, in this one here, you'll see there's blue and then purple, and the blue are all the pieces for one card, the purple are all the pieces for this other card. They do make 2 of the same card, or if it makes 3 or 4 cards, they're all the same card. So this sketch is the only one sketch that you need. And the templates that I've picked today, most of these are available for free at jesscrafts.com, and the links in the video description will bring you to the free templates. But my newest 10 templates are only available in the Etsy shop. So you can purchase just the last 10 if you already have 1 through 50. As I said, those have been available for a long time, and they are all available for free. So you could purchase the last 10 if you want. And then there's also just a pack to get all 60 really quickly, so you don't have to download them individually. Okay, so we have 6x6 paper busting template number 511, which has 2 sketch options. I don't do that necessarily often, but sometimes. 29, 34, 49, and 55. So kind of like a little mini celebration for myself. I picked 1 from each set. So 1 from 1 through 10, 11 through 20, etc. Just so that I was using a whole variety of my templates, because I am quite happy to see I still have ideas after all this time for new ways of using the 6x6 pattern paper. So what I'm going to do first is decide which patterned paper and even probably which cardstock I think would go well with the sketch. And so I'm going to pick 2 pieces of patterned paper for each sketch, which means that I'm going to make 4 cards for each sketch. I have 6 sketches. 4 times 6 is 24. Hopefully I could do math there. Okay, so I'm probably going to pick 1 bolder patterned paper and 1 like more simple pattern paper. So let's just take a quick flip through. I would consider this more on this, like this is a little bit in between because the print is small, but it's quite busy. This is a little bit less busy, but also small. This to me is definitely one of my ones that I would pair with a larger pattern. And there's 2 of each sheet. And this one is again kind of towards the middle, but I would classify it as bold and pair it with something more simple. This pink stripe is on the simple side, and then these Santas, they're the largest design in the collection. So I'm thinking these Santas are quite large, and they're gonna need to be paired with either the pink or the red stripe paper. I do think this is a good sketch for them just because these are the smallest pieces in the sketch and they're not too small, so they aren't too difficult to work with. So maybe a Santa paper for this one would be good. I'm thinking though, I have an excess of both blues and pinks. So if I pick these 2 pattern papers, maybe I can pair it with some pink cardstock. And this is the cardstock I'm going to need for the cardstock mats. I have packs of pink and blue cardstock from Recollections. I'll show you them. That's kind of what's making noise off screen. And so I'm trying to think about how I'm going to use these up. I'm liking I think that pink color. So I will take all of this and put it to the side, and we'll talk about cutting them later. I am putting a whole sheet of cardstock aside with each of these, but I probably won't need the whole sheet, so I will probably borrow across with scraps and that kind of thing. However, I just want to make sure that I have set aside some of the cardstock and made some of those design decisions all at once, because I find that to be helpful to like kind of do these things in batches. So for 6x6 paper busting template number 11, I do notice there's a chance I won't see very much of one of the papers, so maybe it's not the best for a larger scale paper. And I did just use the Santas already, and those are the ones I think will be the most challenging. If I pick this pink stripe paper, I want to pick another paper that I can use similarly. So like this pink paper, these both would not look best on a pink cardstock mat, so then I can go to my blue cardstock mats. So I think I want to keep the pinks together, so I'll pick that for this one and grab I just said not to do a pink cardstock mat and immediately went to grab it. I mean, I think you could be like super monochromatic and just do pink, 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 pink. So that's up to you. I think if you did pink for one and not pink for the other, then the pink mat might look a little bit might stand out. Sorry, that's not quite the way I want to describe it. But like if I did a pink cardstock mat here, they kind of blend into each other and it looks fine and it works. But if I put this same paper on the card, this really pops off the mat. And so maybe that creates a different kind of balance than you might want. But you know, you can make your personal design choices around that. I do kind of like the idea of the pink on pink now that I see it though. So maybe I will just go full on pink card for that one. Okay, we'll put that off to the side. Template number 29. This is one with a really large, like both of the pieces are really large. So I think I'll go back to Santa. But maybe this time I'll be a little more adventurous and pair him not with the stripes, but with this one that's a smaller scale, but we'll let this be like kind of a busy card. And again, I think that that works because they're larger pieces. If they were teeny tiny pieces and lots of busy paper, that might be a bit more challenging. So here, I think I could go with pink or blue, but I think I want to lean towards blue just so that I'm kind of, I don't know, I don't want to add more pink to cards than I need to, so that these cards are better suited for a variety of people. I think pink is as a color people have strong feelings about, let's say. So let's add a blue in there. And then this again will be kind of more like that monochromatic look where it's just blue on blue, but both of the papers have a lot of blue. Okay. Then number 34, I think could work with any of these. It does have a good opportunity to show off a good amount of a particular pattern. So maybe we'll do the Christmas ornaments. Oh, so something I did want to mention, sorry, that I'm thinking about it now. A couple of these patterned papers were directional, particularly the Santas and the ornaments. And honestly, even a little bit, this one here at the end, all the candy canes are facing in the same direction. So this to me is the top of the paper. All the candles are that way, that kind of thing. So I did only pick templates that work with directional patterned paper. And so you just want to kind of keep that in mind if you're working with directional pattern paper or not. Make sure your sketches are going to work before you start picking out your paper or cutting things. Okay, so then I want to pair it with something on the simple side. Maybe, I'm thinking maybe if I go with red, then I can go again with a blue cardstock. And even though there's pink all over this collection, maybe I can lean this card away from the pink as well. And next up we have sketch number 49. I am looking ahead to sketch 55 and I'm noticing they are overall quite small patterns. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to use the Christmas ornaments one last time with this larger sketch. And then, so let's look at the paper that I have left. I have the holly, the pink stripe, and this like variety paper. I don't even know what to call it. The blue paper with everything else on it. I did already pair the holly with the pink stripes. So if I want to mix it up, I should probably do like this, where the pink stripes, you know, I have to pick another paper for the holly. And, I don't know, I think the holly could go with the ornaments, and then we could do these two together. But I'm wondering if it just, I'm trying to kind of think about the busyness of all of them. I think I like these two together. So let's do the ornaments and the holly for this one. What's tricky about that is one of these papers has a blue background, one of these papers has a pink background. So like, what should I do for the coordinating cardstock? My blue pack does have this paper that to me is much more of like a teal. And I think that could work. I think it kind of pulls in the like bluish green of these leaves, and then both papers kind of stand out a bit more. Whereas if I went too close to the blues in this paper, but part of the process is honestly just like comparing these all. And that's why I suggest doing that as the first thing. I think this provides a strong contrast, even with that light blue. So I think I'll go with this one. But a lot of the process to me is this picking of papers and that kind of thing, because once I have all of that, I know how to cut these, like, because that's what the template does. That's the strength of using these templates, is it tells you exactly, you know, cut here and assemble this way. And you can make some creative choices around how you do that, but I like the creativity to be in the picking of the patterns and embellishments, because that's what I personally enjoy about card making, is playing with the pattern papers. So then we have these two. Similarly, I need to either lean into the blue or the pink. I mean, I could, of course, just pick a whole third color, but that's kind of what I've decided to do for today. If I go with like a light blue, then they both stand off of it pretty well, and it's not too matchy-matchy with either. And then in terms of picking embellishments, that I will do after I assemble the cards, because I think that is easiest for me. But again, one of the like fun parts of this process. Okay, so for 6x6 paper busting template number 5, I'm going to start back at the beginning. And I'm going to cut the papers. When you are using tools like paper trimmers, please follow all manufacturers' safety instructions. I'm going to cut 2 papers at once because my paper trimmer can handle that. And I'm going to start by cutting it in half to 3 by 6 inches. All of these measurements are found on the cutting template portion, and all of the mat measurements are found on the sketch. I am going to skip some mats today, just because it makes the process a little bit faster when you're making a whole bunch of cards. Now that I have my 3 by 6, the template calls for these strips that go in the background here to be 3 by 1 1/8. So that's a little bit of an odd measurement. I tend to try to shy away from like too small of and specific of measurements, but my paper trimmer does have marks for that. So I'm actually going to cut 1 1/8 off the end. So I'm going to go to 5 and then just 1/8, which is half of a quarter. So if you're familiar where your quarter marks are, most trimmers I think have 1/8, but something to keep in mind. And then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to measure 1 inch over and then just 1/8 mark. And I should be left with one that's 3 by 3 1/4, which is the other measurement you could have looked for there. Okay. And once I have those cut, I will repeat the process on the other half. And then here for the mats, I'm actually thinking I might only do the mats for this large piece, just because the mats are then going to be that kind of odd size of being 1/4 inch bigger, so having to be 3/8. And the Santa paper, I think, needs a mat a bit more. So my 3 by 3 1/4 and then a 4-inch mat. So I'm going to cut my paper at 3 1/4 because that goes a 1/4 inch bigger than the 3-inch side. Oh, I'm realizing this, not all the Santa papers. Sorry, disregard my comment about the Santa papers needing the mat, because not all the Santa papers are going to get a mat. Okay, and then 3 1/4 by 4. So only the large pieces will get the mat, and then we'll do that again. And you can again find those mat measurements on the sketch. I'll have to cut 4 of those. So again, taking it to 3 1/4 by 4. And once I make that last cut or last couple cuts, then I'll have all the pieces that I need for this particular card set of cards. And I think I'm gonna do craft card bases just to make it a little bit different and interesting. I like craft at Christmas. And so I can then take like the 4 card bases that I need and the sketch and put these all together. And in the end, I will show you assembling one for each card just to, you know, again, keep the video at a reasonable length. Let's look at 6x6 paper busting template number 11. We are again starting with our 2 sheets of 6x6 paper. We are cutting them in half at the 3x6 inch mark. Then I'm turning it on its side, and we're going to need to, our top piece, our large piece is going to be 4.5 inches. So I'm taking that measurement, and then I'm left with 1.5 by 3 inches here, 1.5 by 3, and I'm cutting them to 1.5 inch squares. Again, cutting 2 papers at once, but you do what works best for you and for your paper trimmer, and then the same measurements on the second half. Then I'm thinking I like this sketch a little bit, or this sketch for this process a little bit better. And with that, I can just, again, do just mats for the larger pieces. So let's see if we can get it out of these scraps, especially if we can get it, what we need out of this scrap. It's 4 3/8. Oh, I need a bigger one than that, so I can't even get it out of the scraps. We'll see. Okay, so I had 4.5, so I need 4 3/4. And then that's the length. And then I need 3 1/4 for the width, because our paper was 3 inches. 3 inches is a measurement that's gonna come up a lot when working with 6x6 pattern paper for me, just because I'm always trying to make the sketches the same. So, and then we'll skip those mats for the squares, we'll gather up the cards, we'll put all of this to the side. Kind of keep doing that same process, keeping them all together. We have quite a bit of scrap of this pink cardstock, so I'm going to try to keep that in mind and see if we can use it somewhere. Okay, next up we have template number 29, 2 pieces of pattern paper. This is again cut in half, but this sketch, I think it looks better as a horizontal sketch, so I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting my papers that way, cutting it to 3x6 inches. But cutting like the top piece, separating it from the bottom piece. And then with this that's left, we want one piece that's 2 1/4, and the other piece is 3 3/4. So I'll take it to that 3 3/4 inch measurement, and that's everything I need. I'm going to cut both cardstock mats for this. Everything's very, very simple with this particular sketch. So we're going to cut mats that are 3 1/4 by 4 inches. Again, just a 1/4 inch bigger. So if you've followed along with the sketch, you can either go find them on, so if you follow along with the template, you can find them on the sketch, or you can go ahead and just think what's 1/4 inch bigger than what I just cut. And so we're gonna go to 2 1/4 by, oh gosh, I just messed that up. It should be 2.5 because it needs to be a 1/4 inch bigger. 2.5 by 3 3/4, or sorry, 3 1/4. Wow, I'm saying too many measurements. Maybe this isn't the most helpful method for this. I get a little bit mixed up because I try to go quickly. And we would need to repeat all of that because we need, again, enough for 4 cards. That's enough for 2 cards. So continuing to cut our mats 1/4 inch bigger. You can, of course, if you really prefer an 1/8 inch mat, like that's better for you, then you just have to change up the measurements. But that's what I almost always provide. Okay, next up we have template number 34. We should be halfway through our templates and our cutting. This one, we need to make sure we have the top. So I'm gonna put my directional paper on top, and we're cutting again to 3 by 6 as our starting point, because we're using like half the paper. That's often how they'll come, but not always. And then we're gonna have these, we have to cut 1 inch off the bottom. So you have 3 by 1 inch. And then the top part will be 5 inches long, and we're gonna cut that in half. So it's 1.5. So cut it down to 5, shift it over to 1.5. Same thing. The embellishments, when that comes up later, there are actually 3 of each embellishment, but I'm making like 4 of each card, so it'll be interesting. I'll have to kind of mix and match those. And then here, I am trying to think about what I want to do about mats, because I think I do want them. And I think I want to think about the proportions of the card, because sometimes the mats help to like even out the how the card looks in terms of like how it fills out the space. And so here, I think if I were to put a mat just around this piece and not these back pieces, then they would be looking like they were spread out like quite far and awkwardly on the card. And so I think the mats are pretty important to the overall look of this card, because it gives them a little bit more room in between, because they're, everything's a little bit bigger. So that's something to, one reason I would consider, oh, this is not a good card to skip mats on, for instance. So again, just a 1/4 inch bigger. So we have 1.5 by 5. We'll need 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. Something I'll consider about that is pretty much the length of a piece of cardstock. So I'm going to cut this to 1 3/4. And then this 11-inch side, if I cut it to 2 5 1/4, I'm left with a pretty small scrap here. And so it's a pretty efficient way at going about it, versus if I tried to cut up something that was only 8.5 long, I'd be left with more scraps. So these are kinds of the things I like to consider. And then the 3 by 1, if any of these pieces were 3 1/4 or something, that might be a good way to get started. I might have already cut some of them that way. And I don't think I have yet though. So keep cutting until we have enough, but wanted to just quickly review the measurements for each one. You're going to need these pieces, you need 2 for each card, so keep that in mind. This is the thing that's important to figure out when you're trying to do a similar process on your own, whatever pattern paper you've picked or cardstock or whatever. Try to calculate the full number of mats that you need for each set of cards ahead of time, because unlike the pattern paper, once you cut the pattern paper, you get the right amount of pieces because it tells you exactly how to do it, but because there's no template for the cardstock, you have to keep track of how many pieces you need for each one. I want to mention a couple of quick cardstock tips before I go on to the next sketch. If you have little extra bits of cardstock like this, a lot of times I will glue them together and put them behind little die cut elements as kind of fake foam tape to pop them up. So that'll probably come up later in the video. Or I need some sentiment pieces. So a lot of this pattern paper is going to be too busy to stamp a sentiment directly on. So I'm going to want to stamp some sentiments on small pieces of cardstock. I could cut out cardstock with my banner dies. I have a die here that cuts out just small rectangles. And I'm gonna take pieces of cardstock. So this is I think from sketch number 29. There's going to be a lot of this cardstock is gonna be covered by the pattern paper. So if I do wanna cut a bunch of sentiment banners, I'm gonna cut it out of this cardstock or something like that, so that way I'm not using extra cardstock, and then I'm just covering up the holes that I made. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a quick way to get some of those sentiment pieces you might need, or what to do to be a little more efficient with your overall cardstock. Next up, I have paper busting template number 49. Again, want to make sure that I have my directional paper facing towards the top. The hollies I don't think look as directional, but I made sure the Christmas ornaments were at the top. I'm going to again cut it to 3 by 6 inches. Cut this again down to 3 by 3. And then this is the most important part of the cutting process, because you're going to take the way that you cut these diagonally and separate it and put it in the corners of the card. So you need to make sure that they make sense. And so I want the top of the pattern paper here and cutting a diagonal from the top right to the bottom left. If you do the wrong thing, let me show you in a second, because you can totally recover from it. Say you did the opposite and you cut it from the top left to the bottom right, you would just then have to take your two pieces and put them in the opposite corners of the card, but it basically wouldn't change anything. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's just something to keep in mind. So for sketch number 49, we're going to start with our 6x6 pattern paper. We're going to cut it in half to 3x6, and then we'll take that 3x6 inch piece and cut it in half again. You do want to keep in mind directionality, particularly with this sketch, because if you want the corners to be the same, you need to make sure that you're cutting with the paper at the top and then cutting from the top right to the bottom left. If you do it the opposite way, then your triangles just have to go in opposite corners of the card. So it's not a very big deal, but just something to keep in mind. And I'm going to carefully put the corners at the edges of my paper trimmer so that then these pieces will go in the corners of the card. I am going to only cut mats for the 3x3 square in the center, but I do provide a suggestion for how to make mats for those triangles. As you can see though, the mat for the triangle only shows up on the inner edge, so I'm fine it's like one little time-saving thing I can do, and so I will be cutting it. This piece of cardstock has got something on it. I'm only going to cut mats for this 3x3 square in the center, because these triangles, while I do provide a way of making mats for them, you're only going to see it on the inner edge, and so you're not going to see much of the mat, and so I'll just skip it for the sake of time today. And I'm just going to make so there's a 3x3 inch square in the center, so 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 inch mats. Make sure I cut one for each card, so a total of 4, and then put all of those off. We are at our last sketch, our last bit of cutting. This one again, start by cutting it to 3x6. It doesn't always happen like that with all 60 templates, but it's pretty common. Then you'll take this 3x6 inch piece and you're just going to cut 1/2 inch off of the bottom. So we'll take it to 5 1/2. And in this one, I actually only call for mats for those 1/2 inch pieces. And then these that are 5 1/2 inches long are then going to be 3/4 of an inch in width. And so I definitely want to go slow, because they're a bit of a tricky measurement. If you mess things up, it's kind of a big deal on those, and the more pieces I have, the more likely I am to mess up, in my experience. So then I did notice this is the only one that I chose to use this light blue cardstock on, and I think I don't want to cut into a whole sheet of cardstock just for these small little mats. So I'm going to really just try to find either some scraps left over from all the other mat cutting, or scraps in my stash. So I won't cut those cardstock mats, but I will tell you it is 3 by 1/2 inch. So the mat is 3 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll cut the second set the same way. I'll have all my pieces, and the next thing that I'll do is showing you assembling one of each card, just so that you can see how they come together and we do a bit of embellishing. Let's assemble the card from template and sketch number 5. I'm going to make the 2 pieces of paper here kind of line up so that I think it looks a little more cohesive that way versus reversing them. And then I have my striped paper on a mat. I did go ahead and cut out a bunch of these rectangles from the mentioned MFT die, and I stamped a "'Tis the Season" from the scrapbook.com Wonder and Delight stamp set in black VersaFine ink. I just stamped it in black ink on a whole bunch of them. I think that I basically cut, it was definitely more than 12 for each color, but in the pinks and the blues, so you'll see that assembled throughout. I clearly didn't press that down well enough. I did do some different designs. So like this Santa with the red striped paper, but then here I thought this paper was too busy to put an embellishment on, so then I moved the embellishment to the other side of the card and did a little bit of a different decoration on that side. For template and sketch number 11, I didn't use mats for the back pieces. I did use the first sketch. There are 2 sketches for this one, so you could mix it up if you want to. And then once I've made one that I liked, I just used that to help me decide where exactly to place these background papers on the bottom of the card here. And then so it looks like one continuous piece behind there, but it really is just those 2 squares. And that's a trick I like to use. I think it's very helpful in this no scrap style. And then I am going to place my large paper. I did do, again, a little bit of a mix up with the embellishments just because there are only 3 sets of mittens. So I thought the mittens looked great on these cards, but then I had to pick another one. And for this one here, the holly berries are a little bit more prominent, so I paired the candle that has the holly berry with that particular background. And I did use a little bit of that fake foam tape to pop up my elements here. You can do that wherever you like on your cards as you're assembling them. These embellishments are like thick like cardstock, but also a little bit glossy, just so you have an insight into that. If you were thinking about ordering them. I have purchased some in the past where it was a little bit hard to tell like what the material was when I purchased them online, so I always like to share that when I know. Next up we have sketch number 29. This one is very, very simple, so I thought it was a good opportunity to use a bit of a larger embellishment on some of them. And then also here you can see is where I had cut out some of those sentiment strips that I ultimately used. So as I recommended earlier, to take advantage of those larger pieces that you were going to cover to create your sentiments. And I'm going to add the tree here, but this was another instance where I had picked I picked the candy cane for the Santa. I did think it was like a little hard to read anything or like to parse anything on this paper. It's quite busy, but I really wanted to use up the 24 die cuts. So the candy cane was one of the ones that I felt like worked best for the situation. I had thought about putting like a candle on there because there is candles in the background paper, but then I didn't really want it to look like I was setting Santa's beard on fire by like, with the position of the flame or something like that. And then these ones here, the Santa paper's in the background, so I took advantage of the last Santa embellishment that I had, and then this larger embellishment with the Christmas tree. So just, little things that I think about as I'm placing embellishments. Next up, I have sketch number 34. And the spacing on this one can be a little bit tricky because I need to make sure that I place these 2 pieces wide enough apart that the bottom, like sort of focal point area works out. It does look like perhaps I cut these to be one, it's one of those things like I always do the exact same measurements and yet somehow I will get like an 1/8 of an inch or something off, and I usually just try to kind of roll with it when I notice it. So even those up a little bit, put down, it's probably not the straightest cut because I just cut it with a scissor, but again, it's usually not terribly noticeable in the end. You can always bring your paper trimmer back out to fix issues like that, and there's going to be another sketch where I kind of talk briefly about that as well. So I do have them spaced far enough apart. I have been kind of putting them down gently just in case I needed to re-space them. But if you do something like that, then you can always just kind of go back at the end and make sure everything is pressed down well. That is one of the reasons I like to use tape instead of glue. You have a really limited time window in which you can pull anything with glue or move anything with glue around, whereas I get a little bit more forgiveness with the tape in my experience. And here you might find it helpful to put a little bit of cardstock behind this embellishment just because the bottom part of the embellishment is a little bit higher up on these layers of cardstock, and so it might just kind of smooth things out or help it stick better, but those are things to consider. I used the 3 stockings here, and then I had this bow left over. I didn't embellish them in order. I'd kind of picked out the embellishments as was stacked in my pile, but for the sake of the video, I'm trying to make sure that I film in the same order each time so that it is as clear as possible. So we're on to sketch number 49, and when I have a piece with like pointed ends, I do tend to switch over to liquid glue just because I feel like I get to get in those corners a little bit easier with the liquid glue than I would with the ATG or other kind of like tape type of adhesive. And that to me is particularly important because otherwise these corners can come up later and get kind of ruined, and they're a little bit more delicate because they are those, you know, really fine tipped corners. So it's the one time where I'm like, I definitely like to switch to liquid glue. I will also often use liquid glue for like small embellishments. When I glue my pieces of like extra cardstock together, I will also often use liquid glue. So it's definitely part of my adhesive repertoire. My understanding is it can be pretty economical too, but I purchased my ATG many years ago. I was able to purchase tape in bulk at an inexpensive price, and so it has been pretty economical for me, but now my understanding is the ATG is no longer available, and so it is not as good of a cost-saving situation. Okay, and so then I'll put my holly paper on the mat. I generally picked the sentiment to match the matte color that I was using. And here's another one of the candles, again, kind of using it with that holly berry paper. It's here I used 2 of the candles and 2 of the bows. I just thought that the bows, because they were so like solid, they looked good with the ornament paper, which is a little bit more busy, but then this ties in together because of the holly leaves, so that's kind of where I made that decision. Our last card is template number 55 with its card sketch. This is one of the new ones. There is now 51 through 60 and available in the Etsy shop. So I made a mistake. I was supposed to cut them so that they could be in a vertical position, but I cut the paper wrong, and now I have to work and make a horizontal card. And that is less than ideal because this isn't one that adapts easily to being turned on its side, considering the way that I cut it. Okay, so like I have all of these pieces that I can just place vertically on the card. That's not too big of a deal, but it means that my little like sentiment strip or focal point strip is also vertical. And I'll show you the problem that creates in just a moment after I get all of these onto the card. Getting this spacing right is definitely a little bit tricky, and I might go back and adjust it, we'll see. But okay, so I have all these pieces vertical. This piece these are all horizontal. This piece, however, if I look at its directionality, it is in the vertical orientation. So I don't really want it to look like that on the card. What I've decided to do is just mostly cover it up. So I have made the entire card horizontal, and then I take this piece and I put it wrong on the card. You know, it's not facing the right direction. But then I'm going to take my sentiment and I'm going to add it, and that's going to cover up a lot of the space here. And then I also have a larger one of my die cut pieces, and I'm going to put that on the rest of it, and I'm going to make sure that I overlap it with the pattern paper quite a bit, as I did here with the same one. So I think that the pink tree really stands off. And this was a time where apparently I chose a variety of colors. I was pretty inconsistent with my choices there, but I was really focused on trying to problem solve this issue, which I didn't notice I had at first. So it did all work out in the end. By covering most of it up, you can't tell that I made that mistake, but I do like to show you how I recover from mistakes because I think that that can be helpful, as this no scrap method in particular, once you make a mistake, you kind of have to work with it because you can't go, there's no extra paper. I mean, of course, you could always just scrap that paper and work with a new one, but I really always like to recover as much as possible. So I have finished 24 cards from one pack of 6x6 patterned paper with no patterned paper scraps. By using craft cardstock, I was able to forego some of the mats and make it a little bit faster, but all the templates that I used today are available, but the last one is available in the Etsy shop. The rest are available for free at jesscrafts.com and will be linked in the video description below. And there's 50 free templates for 6x6 over at jesscrafts.com. So if you don't want to purchase any from the Etsy shop, any of the last 10 there, you can of course just pick one more from the 50 free templates to complete your 24 cards. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.